Baltimore, since we found out about Operation Relentless Pursuit, when I say we, I mean Black Alliance for Peace Baltimore members and Ujima People's Progress Party members, we wrote a press release, and then Erica, who will also be speaking with us in a little bit, wrote a longer article about Operation Relentless Pursuit. And then we decided to do a teach-in to let community members know about this and how it relates to what we are already dealing with in Baltimore with regards to policing and why we need to oppose this. Then we held a second virtual teach-in a few weeks ago. We had about 50 people on that meeting, and it was just before that we learned about this national Resist ORP coalition. And we've also begun outreach to other local groups that we think may be interested in organizing with us around this issue and other issues of domestic repression. So policing has been so violent and corrupt here, even by the state's standards, that the Baltimore Police Department was placed under a consent decree as well. This was after their particularly inhuman treatment of Black residents during the 2015 uprisings after the police murdered Freddie Gray. And unfortunately, all this consent decree effectively does is serve as an acknowledgement that some kind of wrong was done. There's even, I think, the implicit hope there that everyone would just calm down and let them handle it. But what I learned about the consent decree, I have to thank Ujima People's Progress Party, and particularly Brandon Walker, who has a great analysis on this. And Ujima declared, we have no confidence in the BPD monitoring team with their conflicts of interest. And, obviously the police have continued to abuse and kill, to set people up, to terrorize us, to split families up, and so on. And yet this same police department that has been deemed corrupt, even by the Department of Justice, has been gifted money for more cops and more power via Operation Relentless Pursuit. And yeah, there are one of the things that we are concerned about regarding policing in Baltimore is the use of surveillance, because Baltimore historically has used facial recognition, drones, things like this to track protesters and others who they believe have committed some so-called crime. I saw a drone over my head at a protest a few weeks ago. I still haven't figured out whose drone that even is. When I went to just the aquarium a bit ago, to enter, there are these facial recognition infrared temperature check machines. And Baltimore has a privately funded spy plane that started its official test run in May. It captures around 32 square miles of the city per second, and I'm going to show a really short video about that. It's 2 minutes long.
What if cameras recorded everywhere you went from the moment you stepped outside? Spy planes have the ability to do just that, carrying high-resolution cameras that can record every square inch of a city, subjecting residents to constant surveillance. This surveillance is powerful enough to change society, and it's a violation of our constitutional right to privacy. But in Baltimore, the police department is deploying an aerial surveillance program with a company called Persistent Surveillance Systems, which will let spy planes fly over the city for at least 40 hours per week, video recording everyone's outdoor movements. The company will make the recordings available to the Baltimore Police Department to use in criminal investigations. These recordings are detailed enough to give police the ability to go back in time to track pedestrians and vehicles across the city. They can also be linked to surveillance video from ground-based cameras and license plate readers, letting police identify people and see everywhere they go and who they interact with. This kind of tracking is an invasive search into people's movements without a warrant, and an infringement on their rights of association, a violation of the Fourth and First Amendments. Persistent aerial surveillance can reveal an enormous amount about us, including lifestyle data, like what kind of doctors we visit, whether we attend political protests, and how often we go to AA meetings. This is a power no American government has ever had or should have. Persistent surveillance systems knows this data is valuable. They want to sell it to anyone willing to pay, from insurance companies to police departments across the country. The Baltimore Police Department's decision to put residents under continuous aerial surveillance will affect the privacy rights of everyone, but it's especially dangerous for Black and brown residents of Baltimore and any other large city where the program might go next. Law enforcement has secretly used aerial surveillance technology in Black and brown communities before, including to monitor Black Lives Matter protesters in Baltimore. And right now, Baltimore is under a federal consent decree for routinely violating people's constitutional rights. Baltimore's police have a terrible history of racism and lack of accountability for abuses.
So yeah, that has been in the sky, along with the police helicopters. And so one thing that this plane will be used for, in addition to what we heard about in the video, is helping to turn Baltimore into what's called a smart city. And smart as in rigging the city up with smart technology. And this is packaged to sound like a great thing that will make everyone's life easier and more fun. But of course, that's rarely, if ever, the goal of the neoliberal capitalist technocratic state. Baltimore actually won a 2019 Readiness Challenge Award by the Smart Cities Council. And 3 goals that Baltimore states are improving digital city services, expanding education and workforce development, and improving public security. But what this actually means is a city that's even more equipped with a network of smart cameras, sensors, internet covering the whole city that can be used by government, police, private corporations to monitor people and all activity 24/7 for a myriad of reasons. Mainly for intensified control of the population, further criminalization of the Black population, working class population, and for profit. And some of this technology is already in place, such as I think there are about 800 City Watch cameras in Black neighborhoods. And both the technology and the tech, we have to thank the Deadly Exchange program for that, and that's the police exchange with US and Israeli police, and they share basically their most genocidal and terrorizing practices with each other. Yeah, that's one thing that we have our eye on and are learning more about. And Erica is going to talk about some more policing issues in Baltimore next.
So what I want to talk about is what happens when we survive the police. So I'm going to talk about the case of Keith Davis Jr. That is a case that's happening here in Baltimore. It's a 5-year case. Keith, had he died, he would have been another Freddie Gray, but he survived. The case against Keith Davis Jr. is entangled in Baltimore politics and political allegiances. And what has happened in the last 5 years has been on par with the neoliberal democratic misleadership engulfing the city. Assumed to be a hack thief, a case of mistaken identity led 4 Baltimore police officers to corner Davis Jr. into a dark garage after an on-foot chase in West Baltimore. Those 4 officers let up to 44 rounds of bullets in that garage, resulting in Davis Jr. being shot 3 times. 1 bullet busting through his sinus cavity, shattering his jawbone into fragments. For the next 5 years, Davis Jr. would be persecuted for having survived. Davis Jr. was the first Baltimore police-involved incident since the murder of Freddie Gray in April of that same year. Managing to survive a Baltimore Police Department murder attempt, and after undergoing emergency surgery for the multiple fractures that were the result of being shot 3 times, he was sent to jail and would eventually be charged with the murder of security officer Kevin Jones. While a jury acquitted Davis Jr. of the robbery accusations and other charges, he was convicted of possessing a gun, which hadn't been fired but was found on the top of the refrigerator he was hiding behind while being shot at. The conviction was a discrepancy brought on by previous felony convictions. He was legally not supposed to be in the same space as a gun. None of the 4 officers involved were ever charged for the shooting of Davis Jr. But Davis Jr. would instead spend the next 5 years fighting a murder charge predicated by a gun found that had no evidence of ever being fired, yet was said to have been used in the murder of the security officer. There had been 5 court hearings, 4 for the murder accusation, despite hung juries resulting in mistrials. Davis Jr. is the second person in this country's history to be tried in a courtroom multiple times for the exact same case. Each new trial brought new evidence, which called into question both police testimony and prosecutor conduct in the case. To sit in the courtroom during each trial was to be astonished in disbelief. Witness descriptions did not match. Cops' courtroom descriptions did not match. The descriptions of the gun Davis Jr. allegedly used to murder Kevin Jones and other statements did not match. There was no substantial DNA evidence, and the prosecutor, Patrick Seidel, even argued against the validity of DNA evidence. During the rebuttal closing, where a sensationalized motive for the murder was made that was not offered during the trial, Seidel claimed that fingerprints are far more reliable than DNA. Among those aforementioned courtroom revelations were other gems, like learning the gun allegedly used by Davis Jr. was purchased in a gun consignment shop where cops in the city frequent. Also, defense attorneys discovered the bullets from the gun in question were missing in the evidence room. To top it all off, lead firearms examiner James Wagster, who eyeballs evidence and testifies on ballistic tool mark evidence in countless cases persecuted by the Baltimore State's Attorney's Office, is legally blind. All of these things brought up during motions, hearings, and during trials were overruled and dismissed by judges, including the Honorable Judge Sylvester Cox, who did not want to set a precedent that would open the floodgates for retrials. Davis Jr. was subsequently found in February guilty and convicted of second-degree murder. The case of Keith Davis Jr. illuminates the politics that surround a Black and democratically led city like Baltimore. Furthermore, it illuminates the problems with state prosecutors. Prosecutors are cops. They are a driving force of not only mass criminalization, but incarceration as well. So while we discuss the powers that will be allowed to police through programs like Operation Relentless Pursuit, we must also discuss that in the event that citizens survive these state murders attempts, it is the prosecutors who actively jail us. Prosecutors yield unprecedented and unparalleled levels of discretion, including charging and bail. And as we've seen in the case of Breonna Taylor, the decision not to charge. Prosecutors are not interested in truth, justice, or community safety. They are interested in convictions. And where Baltimore City is concerned, prosecutors such as Marilyn Mosby protect the same police officers in a city where dissent decree a spy plane in Operation Relentless Pursuit convictions.
Erica Caines is also with Black Alliance for Peace Baltimore and Ujima People's Progress Party. But yeah, we can take some questions unless Erica had a couple more things she wanted to say.
Okay,
no, I'm
Erica.
sorry, guys. I also wanted to mention that I'm an editor for Hood Communist as well, Hood Communist blog. So that's what most of the articles that I'm linking in the chat you can find on Operation Relentless Pursuit, and I'm going to also link the one on Keith Davis Jr.
Thank you, Erica. And I thank you for elevating the issue of prosecutorial ethics and misconduct to this conversation. And a lot of cities, especially top 25 urban cities, it's a lot of folks, community people who don't understand the power of the prosecutor. The prosecutor is so important.
So the couple of questions that we have from Carlton Mayer, who's funding Baltimore PD surveillance, public funding or private funding or both? And then the other question comes from Ujima People's Progress Party. Do we see imperialism abroad in Africa and indigenous nations as the premise for anti-imperialism and the full removal in the US? That's a big question. So we'll see if Baltimore can answer the first one, and anyone else who wants to join and answer the question about imperialism abroad and subsequently here in the US, please feel free to chime in.
So as far as the surveillance, the plane is privately funded, and then there's also, you know, at this point, even people's private, like their Ring doorbell cameras and that type of thing, there is sharing between these private cameras and the police going on as well. So I think there's a pretty intricate network of private surveillance that's getting mixed in to the surveillance that we're seeing in Baltimore.
Black Alliance for Peace has a campaign called No Compromise, No Retreat. And in that campaign, we sort of make those connections. We argue that domestic and global imperialism are counterparts. So anything that we see happening here domestically with us in over-policing is the exact same over-militarization that's happening globally. When it's of over 400 bases globally, that kind of mimics what we look like as colonized communities. And it's the same sort of force. And when we look at the Deadly Exchange Program, which is the program with Israel, the training with police, we could see how those sort of geopolitics are connected, that it's all sort of interconnected, and these things are not separate issues. So if you're going to be anti-police, you should as well be anti-imperialist.